All right, so today we're gonna take a deep dive into a career path that's honestly way more interesting than it might seem at first glance.
Definitely. It's one you might not expect.
Yeah, and it really highlights how technology is changing the game in like almost every industry.
Mm.
We're talking about rail intermodal equipment operators.
Yeah. And we've got a ton of great info from RoleCatcher on this one.
Right. They provided like career guides, interview tips, the whole nine yards.
The whole 9 yards. And we're talking about yards,
Okay.
literally,
Yeah.
big container yards, trains, trucks, all that good stuff.
Exactly. So, like, imagine those massive container yards, right? You got these giant steel containers
So,
moving between trains and trucks. That's our rail intermodal equipment operator in action.
and it's so much more than just, muscle and steel these days. I mean, the tech involved is fascinating.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's got to be pretty high tech to keep all that moving smoothly.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, they're conducting an orchestra of cargo using
Yeah.
onboard computers and these sophisticated yard management systems.
Whoa. So, we're talking like air traffic control, but for shipping containers.
Exactly. And just like air traffic control, safety is absolutely paramount. One small mistake could have huge consequences. You're dealing with tons of cargo, often in really tight spaces, with other vehicles and equipment moving all around you.
Yeah, that sounds intense, to say the least. And this is where I think it gets really interesting, especially knowing your interest in automation. A lot of the really heavy lifting is still done by these skilled operators, but technology is really starting to change how it all works.
For sure. And especially when you think about things like handling hazardous materials, there's a huge push to minimize human exposure to that stuff. So you're seeing robotic arms, automated guided vehicles, all that cool tech is coming into play.
Okay, so not only is this job like physically demanding and mentally engaging, but you're also on the cutting edge of a field that's always evolving.
It's definitely not your grandpa's train yard, that's for sure.
So, RoleCatcher also broke down the career progression, starting from entry level all the way up to senior operator.
Yeah, it's actually a very well-defined path, which is really helpful for anyone thinking about this as a long-term career.
So, walk us through that. Like, what are those early days like for a brand new operator?
Sure. So starting out, you're basically building those foundational skills.
Huh?
You're getting comfortable with the equipment, learning how the yard operates, all the ins and outs.
So, it's like learning the individual instruments before you can join the orchestra.
Exactly. And then as you gain more experience, you move up to junior operator. That's where you start to take on more responsibility. You might be leading by example for newer recruits.
So, it becomes less about like following directions and more about showing you've mastered those core skills.
Yeah, you got it. And that takes us to the intermediate level, which I think is where things get really interesting, especially for someone with your eye on the bigger picture.
Okay, so they've paid their dues, they're comfortable with the tech. What does an intermediate operator actually do? Like, what's next in their journey?
Now, they're not just operating the equipment, they're starting to coordinate the whole dance.
Huh.
They're using that yard management system. Remember, it's like air traffic control for containers to make sure everything is flowing smoothly. They're also starting to mentor those junior operators, passing on their knowledge.
So it's a step up in responsibility, but also leadership, right? They're becoming a more well-rounded asset to the entire operation.
You got it. And that sets them up perfectly for that top run senior rail intermodal equipment operator.
Ah, the conductor of the cargo orchestra. I like it. So what does mastery look like at that level? What are they actually doing day to day?
Well, that's where all those years of experience really translate into expertise. They're overseeing the entire loading and unloading process, making sure all the safety protocols are being followed, and working closely with yard management to make sure everything is running as efficiently as possible.
I bet that translates into some serious job security, right? Like you mentioned e-commerce earlier, and I was reading that because of the huge increase in online shopping, the demand for skilled operators in this field is supposed to like skyrocket.
Oh, absolutely. I think the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually predicts growth of like X% over the next decade, which is way faster than a lot of other industries.
Wow, X%. That's huge.
It is. It's definitely a career path with a lot of upward momentum right now. And this is where I think RoleCatcher really shines with these resources because they don't just, explain the job. They give you the tools you need to actually land it.
Right. Like those interview questions they provide are amazing. They're so much more targeted than the usual, tell me about a time you type questions.
Oh, for sure. Like instead of just asking about teamwork, they'll ask something like, how do you ensure clear communication with your team in a loud and fast-paced environment? It really gets at the specific challenges of this role.
Yeah, it's like they bottled up the hiring manager's brain and poured it out for you to study. And speaking of prepping for success, you mentioned that RoleCatcher also helps you tailor your CV. What's that all about?
So they actually analyze the skills and keywords employers are looking for and then help you highlight those things in your CV.
Oh, that's really useful.
Yeah, it's incredibly helpful for someone who is, say, new to the field or maybe switching careers.
It's like having a career coach right in your pocket.
That's a great way to put it. They've really streamlined that whole process of researching and applying for these roles.
So you're not just like wandering around in the dark hoping for the best. You've got a roadmap, A&D, a flashlight with RoleCatcher.
Precisely.
I love it. And knowing how much you value efficiency, I have a feeling you'd really appreciate that aspect of what they offer.
Oh, absolutely, I do. I do. Yeah, totally. It really takes the guesswork out of it.
For sure. So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts? We've covered a lot of ground, like the technology, the career path, just the scale of it all. It's impressive. What's the one thing that you think will surprise our listeners the most?
For me, it's the unexpected mix of skills this job requires. Like you've got to be physically strong, you need the technical know-how, got to be a good problem solver, and then as you move up, leadership becomes a big part of it too.
Right, right. It's definitely more than just like moving containers around. It's about orchestrating this whole complex system, often under a lot of pressure.
Exactly. And not to mention the safety aspect. We're talking about millions of dollars worth of cargo riding on your decisions.
Yeah, no pressure, right.
Yeah,
So to sum it up, it sounds like a career path with way more depth than most people probably realize.
absolutely. And when you factor in, the growth in e-commerce and all the advancements in automation, it's only going to become more dynamic, more in demand.
Yeah, it's like the perfect storm of opportunity for anyone with the right skills and the drive to succeed.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you have it, folks. A deep dive into the world of rail intermodal equipment operators, a career path that's more than meets the eye. It's high tech, it's hands-on, it's at the heart of how we get like everything these days.
And with the insights and resources from RoleCatcher, you'll be, well on your way to navigating this exciting career path.
For sure. Big thanks to you for sharing your expertise with us, and of course to our listeners for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, sometimes those unexpected paths lead to the most rewarding destinations.
Totally, totally. It takes the guesswork out, makes it way less intimidating, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so as we kind of start to wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts? We've covered so much, the technology, that career path, the sheer scale of it all. What's the one thing that you think would surprise our listeners the most about this whole career path? That's a good question. I think for me, what stands out is how this job really brings together all these different skills. You've got to have the physical strength, obviously, but also the technical knowledge. And then there's the problem solving. And as you progress, leadership becomes a huge EE part of it too.
Right. It's like you said earlier, it's way more than just moving containers around. You're basically orchestrating this whole intricate system, often with, very little room for error.
Exactly, exactly. And let's not forget the safety aspect. You're responsible for like millions of dollars worth of cargo. The pressure's definitely
Yeah,
on.
no pressure, right? But seriously, it sounds like a career path with so much more depth than people realize.
I think so, yeah. And when you consider things like the growth of e-commerce, the advancements in automation, it's a field that's poised for even more growth, more dynamism.
It's like the perfect storm of opportunity if you have the right skills and the drive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, folks, there you have it. That's our deep dive into the world of rail intermodal equipment operators, a career path that's definitely more than meets the eye, high tech, hands-on, and at the heart of, well, pretty much everything we use and consume these days.
And with the insights and resources from RoleCatcher, our listeners will be well equipped to explore this career path, maybe even make it their own.
Absolutely. A huge thank you to you for lending your expertise to this deep dive. And of course, to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, sometimes the most unexpected paths can lead to the most fulfilling destinations.